Hello, everyone. Good evening for those of you in New York, and then for those on the West Coast, like us here. Good late afternoon. Thank you all for joining. I'm going to give you a few seconds to log in, do my welcome messages, especially for those of you who are new to our broadcast. So welcome if you're tuning in for the first time. This is the Maison du Rouge Monday night weekly live broadcast. I'm your host, Lucy Sweetkill, one half of the duo that is Maison du Rouge. A little bit about who we are. LMDR is dedicated to expanding the BDSM experience by discussing, educating, and informing our audiences about the intersections of kink, wellness, sexuality, spirituality, and social activism. We aim to create a safe space for discussing these topics, as well as providing an avenue for our guests to share their stories and experiences. Thank you again for joining us. Tonight, our guests are Eco-Fetishist and the duo behind Sacred Sadism, a conceptual art piece and research project which, in its current interim, is presented as an online business. While they offer their fetish art objects for sale online, the meat of the work is the performance, education, and online activation of questions reaching beyond the realm of commerce. They consider their BDSM tools to be catalysts for the broader social political inquiries their work encompasses. Please welcome pronouns, he, him, or any pronoun, Themba. Themba, how do you say your last name? Because I think I'm going to get this wrong. Alleyne, okay. And pronouns she, her, Genevieve, Belleveau? How do I?
You got it.
Okay. I'm like, these are like, I mean, I'm used to like Asian last names are very difficult. So I give people that. So I'd rather ask. So thank you too for joining us. So let's start off. I know I gave you guys a pretty big intro. Is there anything that I'm missing that you want to include in that introduction?
No, I
feel like you nailed it.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. So we love to start off anytime we have new guests on around your origin story. So, how did this duo come about? How did Sacred Sadism come about?
So the seed of Sacred Sadism, so to speak, was planted in 2014. Literally the first day that I moved to Los Angeles, and I just had this realization that I wanted to explore BDSM using plants as a starting point. So I started doing some experiments, performances, a lot of research, got into BDSM myself formally for the first time. And about 2 years later, I was online dating, and Themba was online dating, and we met each other online, and learned that we wanted to explore BDSM together.
I think that's it.
Yeah, so we wanted to explore BDSM together, and I had this idea in my mind since 2014 of making BDSM tools, impact play tools, specifically using fake plants. And so in our courtship, Themba, while I was away on a trip, sculpted a paddle out of redwood.
Wow.
And that was the first BDSM. The first tool you made for me. You had made BDSM tools before.
Yeah, in college, I was going to school in San Francisco in the Bay Area, and that's kind of where I got my introduction to the BDSM scene. But I had no money because I was a college student, and started like fashioning my own bloggers out of bike tubes. I'm also a cyclist, so I had a lot of like popped tires and bike tubes laying around.
Yeah, so that kind of sparked this collaboration, that first paddle, and shortly thereafter, I was like, I want to make these tools, and you were like, well, I can make a handle.
Let's do this.
And
make the handles.
And then that's when we started making the tool portion of the project, which I think was a really cool way to get people to start thinking about the more conceptual foundation that it was built on. So in 2018, we launched Sacred Sadism as a conceptual art masquerading as an online business, and started selling the tools to people who wanted them, and talking about the things we wanted to talk about in relation to eco-fetishism.
So that's awesome. Can you explain to our audience, because a lot of people are going to wonder, what does eco-fetishism mean? Like, what does that mean to you two?
I'll jump in. Yeah. It's I meant after you. Yeah.
No, you go ahead.
It's kind of a reimagining of like what kink can be. We're kind of talking about our relationships with power in the interpersonal space, and kind of what kink is. So we're reimagining kind of the tools, the aesthetics of kink, as opposed to, in mainstream media, kink is pushed as like this dungeons, red, black, chains, whips kind of a thing, which is part of it. But it can also be reimagined in any scenario, whatever fantasy you might have, like the core elements of kink apply to whatever you want to do.
And I would say the eco-fetish term in particular, that was something a friend of ours coined in relation to our work, and we were kind of like, oh yeah, we like that. That sounds right. And then when we started looking into it, fetish has this really interesting origin of like colonization and kind of like stealing from and taking from, and we sort of started to draw the correlation in the way that people treat the earth, which is often equated with eco or ecology or whatever that which, eco doesn't mean green. Eco means an ecology, a relationship of things amongst one another. So we started thinking about how that fetishization and the history of colonization that's with fetishization relates to our own colonization of and domination over our surroundings and the ecosystems around us. And we've been kind of trying to use that eco, equating with green in people's minds, using that imagery to try to draw in those connections to colonization, dominator paradigms, and kind of bigger, like we said in the intro, sociopolitical ideas.
Cool. I mean, I was looking at your current lineup of products too. Like I came across you all through Instagram, as many of us do now. And I just love the photos that you two would create, because it was very like earthy and had a lot of different elements that people didn't usually see in the kink scene, right? The greens that are just earth tones, flowers, all of that. And I think you're seeing a little shift, but I thought that was just like, it was so dreamy. I felt like it was like a kinky fairyland. That's what when I would see your photos, I was like, oh, this is like kinky fairyland, right?
Right, and that.
Yeah, go ahead.
And that was like one of the main things that in its origin, I was looking for a way into BDSM, and wasn't because I'm an artist and I have such a like snobbishly trained like aesthetic focal point. I was trying to find an aesthetic that I could also feel like sexy in, and the ones that existed didn't feel like sexy to me personally. And I found that when I started working with and around plants and plant life in relation to BDSM, that's when I felt like kind of turned on and into what was going on. Even if the play scenarios in a sense are the same, the surroundings and the environment can, as I'm sure you know, the set and the setting can create so much of the eroticism for any kind of BDSM scene. So yeah, for me, I was hoping, I found that it worked for me, and I was like, I bet there's other people that, feel turned on by this kind of dreamy fairy setting,
Yeah, just bring like a fresh look too.
Yeah.
I feel like we've been pretty lucky to work with, collaborate with some really talented photographers and bring out like these kind of
Oh yeah.
images and things that have been kind of stewing in your head.
Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, and everyone we've collaborated with has been such a huge part of bringing all those ideas to life.
Yeah, I think you are right. Like, I think sometimes what keeps people away from kink and BDSM is sometimes it can feel so hard, right? Just and so dark, and it can feel very inaccessible for some folks who are maybe not into a certain type of music or a certain type of aesthetic. And I feel like a lot of your work feels much more accessible in that sense. Like, it's very beautiful. It's very, like, there's this really great fantasy around it.
Yeah, and I think it highlights maybe some aspects that already exist in kink but aren't part of the mainstream narrative. For example, the nurturing, caring, like non-punitive play. I think a lot of people think of all BDSM tops are like punishers, or like, that we have created something that we hope can highlight the fact that there's so much love, and so
joy,
much joy and care, and desire and beauty in BDSM that I think certain aesthetics don't highlight. It's not that it's not there in like a leather, scene or something. It just maybe people aren't going to see it as easily as when you see, oh, that's a gardener tending a plant. Like, there's care there. That makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. That's awesome.
I think so much of that. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think so much of that also is like, the narrative that media portrays the kink scene as well. Like, they're completely missing a lot of the those things that we're talking about. The care, the joy, the nuance. I remember like the first play party I went to, like I witnessed this couple doing like a really heavy impact scene, and in the middle of it just like burst out laughing and telling each other how much they loved each other. And I was like, oh my God, I found the right place. This is like what I want to be a part of.
Something so brutal can be so beautiful and joyful, and of course the key there is consent, and trust,
collaboration.
So let me ask some of your guys' personal origin stories of like what brought you individually, what brought your interest into kink? How did that start for you individually?
I guess my sexuality started out kind of in a really explorative way. So that was something that I was kind of seeking out. And like I mentioned, I went to college in San Francisco, and randomly, my headphone fell out. I kind of stumbled my way into the Folsom. I was blanking on it. Stumbled my way into Folsom, and that was kind of like my first like main or full exposure to like what the kink scene was. I knew what a dominatrix was at the time, but that was like the limit of my understanding of BDSM. And I think there I realized that there's other people out there that are interested in exploring what sexuality could bring them, what they can bring to sexuality, different ways it can be expressed. And that really drew me in, because that was something that I guess I was looking for after kind of like my formative early sexual experiences, where it was very like playful, explorative. Let's try this. Let's see what this is. And kind of found a home there, and doing reading and trying to figure out how do I fit into this world.
Awesome. Folsom is an enlightened thing for a lot of people. That was my experience too with Folsom.
Oh, nice. Cool. Maybe you guys were at the same Folsom.
Maybe.
I grew up in the Bay Area, and Folsom, it's just like, you can't help. If you're in the Bay Area, you're gonna come into contact with Folsom at some point. So
for me, I think one of the first times I realized I was really interested in BDSM consciously was watching the documentary Bob Flanagan's Super Masochist. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's a documentary about Bob Flanagan, who was an artist, also at the time the oldest survivor of cystic fibrosis, and his partner Cherie Rose, who had a BDSM dynamic relationship. And I believe in that documentary, it's sort of, I can't remember if he says it or implies that he believes his experience with BDSM and as a sub is really what kept him alive and thriving. And it really highlighted the healing properties that BDSM can have for some people. And this was someone who, I think the documentary, to be exact, is called Sick, Bob Flanagan's Super Masochist. Really recommend it if you haven't seen it. It really shows a super interesting facet of BDSM, which for some people, I feel like for people too dealing with chronic pain, this idea of having control of or mediating that pain through BDSM can be a really healing thing. So for me, I started to see through watching that this was this very interest I was trained in performance art in undergrad and very interested in the body and what the body holds and can unlock through bodily what's the word endurance is a big interest to me in performance art, and that was just sort of unlocked something for me that BDSM and endurance and performance art all have something in common. And that was sort of an important moment for my understanding.
That's awesome. So what do you both consider yourselves in regards to, or do you, top, bottom, switches,
Or abolish all hierarchies of domination control? I consider myself a switch, but I'm always open to really letting whatever those hierarchies or labels are develop and change, because I think it depends a lot on your partner. I never thought that I wanted to submit to anybody until I met Themba, and I was like, I want you to put a damn collar on me. I don't know why. But, for me, it's so dependent on who I'm with and how we're playing and what we enjoy doing.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess I would say top now. I started out identifying more as a switch, but I don't think I want to limit myself to that label. Really, if something sounds interesting, I'm going to try it.
Yeah.
So I guess identifying with something that you're primarily interested in is good, but stay flexible.
Yeah.
I love that response, because I think that is something that when people explore just from what you see out there, a lot of new people don't know, and they don't realize it's very fluid. It can be very fluid. It's very flexible, and you evolve. There are so many individuals who go from, being mostly submissive, and then they become more dominant, or vice versa, or whichever, and you evolve, and if you're open to it. And there are people who don't, there are people who have, one area, and that's kind of the area they like to stay in, it's good to just be open to that. So we like to highlight.
Argue, yeah, totally. I would argue too that maybe as we come to have a more broad understanding of the fluidity of so many things, gender, sexuality, all those things, maybe these strict denominations, top, bottom, won't exist, because even within certain acts that one person might think of as submissive, another person might think of as dominant.
Yeah.
What makes an activity a top or a bottom activity? Why do we have those ideas? A lot of times they're tied to really traditional ideas of gender roles, which I think we're all working on breaking that down, right?
Definitely.
Gender and power.
Gender and power.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things you really just have to see it as an individual moment. Today, I feel like doing this, and I feel like doing it in a dominant way, because you can be very dominant and be like, fuck me now,
That's right.
Exactly.
That's right.
I want you to choke me hard.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
100%. I love that.
Yeah. I know, bossy and bratty bottoms. Like, it's good to feel like, what do you feel like today? Do I feel a little bratty? Do I feel a little, a little sassy? Do I feel like, and being able to communicate that we change in our moods for, many reasons. I do want to ask you two about a word that you don't like associating with you guys, ecosexual. Tell us more about that.
So let's see about that. I think for us, we started to realize there were components of like the mass usage of the word ecosexuality that weren't exactly, as our work developed, weren't exactly jiving with what we were discovering with incorporating BDSM and plants together. We started realizing that this is fully stuff that we didn't know when we started, but when we practiced it, we were like, wait a minute, like, do we think it's cool to like enact our sexuality upon another living being without knowing how that being feels about it? And it gets complicated, because I know that sounds like hippie woo-woo in a lot of ways to impose like a consent paradigm on like a plant as well, right?
Yeah.
You're gonna say something?
No, go ahead.
So yeah, we just started to feel like there's something in being like, I fuck the earth, I have sex with a tree, something I've done in my life. The world is my lover, that feels to us a little bit like it reinforces a dominator paradigm. And by dominator paradigm, we mean this kind of like imperialist, capitalist, colonial, patriarchal paradigm that we're all under right now, that we're also actively trying to destroy in many ways. But that sort of says, this is mine, it's for the taking, I get to do what I want, to whatever I want to do it to. And in some ways that ecosexuality, it's a different thing for all people, but some of like the dominant philosophies of it seem to say like, my sex I get to have sex with whatever I want.
Yeah, imposing human sexuality onto other living beings.
Yeah. And we're not saying that like, don't eat, it's like, it's not like we're saying, oh, you need to get the vegetables consent before you eat it or something like that. But it's more, you know what I mean? It's not like this like level of like hippie, like you can't do anything to other living creatures without their consent. It's just specifically about the way that sexuality is primarily enacted in the world.
Yeah.
Just from a dominant, I get to do what I want. I don't know. I guess the word rape, is like it's how a lot of sex can happen to varying degrees. I mean, is that too strong of a word to say? I don't know.
I'm not sure. Yeah.
But there's a lot of non-consensual sex normalized as sex.
Yeah. Right? I get what you guys are saying. Go ahead, Themba.
Like you're saying, we're not necessarily saying like don't ever touch a plant or anything like that, but it's more
I have cut flowers right here, like,
having the awareness of like, hey, this, just thinking about what you're saying or what you're doing as you're enacting it, where I think a lot of times ecosexual stuff has kind of come off, to me, or to us at least, like there's no awareness to that. It's like you're saying, it's this dominator kind of energy with it.
It's obviously something we don't, we're still working through and working on too. It's like not like we're like, we just noticed over the course of thinking about all of the consent and protocol that goes into BDSM, when we started applying that, you know, in relationship to like incorporating plants into it, or incorporating role play where you become the plant into it, has been like a big part of what we've developed in this. We started to realize like, like this is interesting when you take the headspace of a plant and start to think about like what humans do to you, or like think they can do to you, and like that conversation isn't like actively happen. But I don't know. I feel like I feel like it's coming off as very like hippie woo woo the way
No.
it's not really
No.
what we mean. We don't mean like you
Yeah.
have to figure out how to get the plant to consent. We just mean enacting your sexuality upon the earth, or the earth systems, like you just have a right to it.
Yeah.
Assumes that you're right over all that. It's like a dominant right over all living things that I think humans need to learn about and look at and examine.
I think those are some really important questions to ask, like before claiming a word, right, or claiming an identity. I think it is important to ask yourself some of these deep philosophical questions of what does that look like and what does that mean? And, you know, I think it's important to dissect it, you know, because I think in this world we do live in, there are some you know, trends in words, right? Like trends in how, in just a lot of, in wokeness, right? Like even that being a word itself that people are throwing out. I think it's important to stop and go, okay, here's terminology, you know, that I may be using or I'm going to choose to use. What does this terminology actually mean to me? What is the background behind it? What is my philosophy around it? Like, so, you know, I think it's important that you are asking yourself those questions and they develop, you know, your answers to them. And that's for you to and individually to decide whether that aligns with you or not. I think we see that a lot in BDSM, you know, the terms right now, even just like I've made an effort to step away from some terminology that is very common in BDSM, to stop and think what the context and how that really can push people away, you know, such as the word slave, right? Which is a very common word, or even the word mistress. And what does that mean, right? Or even the word goddess that I know a lot of people do use. Like, are we seeing ourselves as part of the divine? Like, it worries me sometimes when we use some of these words that sort of put us above somebody else. So those are really all important questions to ask during this. And I think that is what's happening as we become more global, as we have these conversations we're having right now. It gives people room to really have intention and have conscious understanding of what words we choose to use to define ourselves.
Yeah.
Oh.
Like the concept of like interrogating your kinks and desires, and like where do I get this from? What does that mean? Like,
what is it rooted in?
Yeah, I definitely think that's important. I want to ask about your performances. I know obviously some of your work might be at a standstill due to, you know, COVID and everything, but how does your work get expressed? How does Sacred Sadism get expressed through your performances, through other avenues beyond your commerce, you know, that you guys are creating through your art?
Are the meat of our work in a lot of ways.
This is the real fun part.
Yeah, I think those have been some of the most gratifying moments for me personally in our project.
I almost feel like impactful too in some ways. I mean, I guess maybe like the aesthetic that we've, you know, cultivated really touches people, but I feel like the direct feedback of hearing, you know, people specifically, like we did a performance at
Bound.
When they had a party here in LA, where we did kind of like a gardener plant scene with a friend of ours, where we like watered her by peeing on her, and like had flowers bloom out of her
after
and
we peed on her.
yeah, and then pruned her, and then after, like, people just like, I had never thought about piss play like that. I never thought like
it was a rave and people were like crying like
Yeah.
at like 2 a.m. at a rave. Like, and that was like a moment where it was like, people were really being like, you showed us like a side of BDSM we knew was there, but like maybe isn't always accessible, which is the care and the nurturing. And that golden shower scene being like a nice specific example of like a lot of people maybe associate golden shower or water sports with like humiliation, degradation, all of this, and we were using it as like, this is to help you grow, like this is nurturing, this is, you need this, you want this.
Yeah.
And there's just a way to flip a lot of common BDSM practices, to flip the script on them just a little. They're still the same thing. They're still essentially doing the same thing, but it helps people see that side in a new light. We can all, everyone has houseplants these days. We're all plant mom and dads. We all understand, like, how to try at least to nurture a plant. And I think it's a really relatable concept, and it can, we've tried to highlight that in our performances, and I think it's been really effective. We've done a couple performances that are specifically in the form of like a workshop, like you would see it like a kink space or a kink education series, those kind of things, and using plant play, or we've done one that was like electro play, using plants to conduct the electricity. Which like we didn't know you could do until a friend told us about it, and we were like, whoa.
Yeah,
that makes sense. They're like water.
Water and salt, so it's like.
What plant did you use? Like, what types of plants?
We used lavender.
We were specifically doing this performance that was about like LA wellness, kind of a sardonic look at like the LA wellness industrial complex. So we were using like self-care things like lavender,
marijuana leaves,
aloe vera. We used white sage, which we made sure to say, we grew in our garden ourselves, and that like the sage, the way people use white sage is like pretty disrespectful. We were trying to tie in the fact that like white sage is typically like not something white people should be, or non-indigenous people should be using. Right?
Yeah. So then how did you guys set up the electricity? I'm like really thinking of the logistics.
Sorry. Forget that this isn't like.
So I was wearing a violet wand with a contact patch, and then just holding the plant piece in my hand, and then using it on Genevieve's skin, and then some of the audience skin.
And actually, afterwards, go ahead.
How did it feel? Like, did it feel similar?
Yeah, very similar to like like if you were to do this with the contact patch, but different plants depending on their water and salt content. Is it salt?
I think so. I think it's mostly the water content. So like and the shape. So like the aloe, I think, had the strongest current through it.
Obviously a water heavy plant.
And very pointy at the end too, so it can get a really good like spark kind of going.
But actually the ganja leaf was pretty tingly too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that because that has a bunch of hairs all over.
Yeah. I think probably that the lavender was like very muted, very mild.
So it really depends on like the water content of the plant and the shape of the plant. Like,
that's cool.
Yeah, we'd love to do that one again. We'd love to do that. We were supposed to do that workshop again in LA, but COVID.
COVID.
Like,
Wow.
Hopefully one day we'll do it again.
Yeah, that's awesome. That you guys found. I mean, it makes sense. Yeah, like there's water in plants, so it makes sense that electricity. Like, but that's really cool to like integrate that.
Yeah, and electroplay is, I think, another. I worked at the stock room here in LA briefly, and my favorite thing to do when I worked there was demoing the violet wand and the electroplay tools on people, because I think it had, like many things in BDSM, it has this like, ooh, electricity, like that's scary, that's
the noise.
The noise,
Yeah.
it has this like scary thing, and then people would try it and be like, what the fuck, I need to buy this thing like immediately. And I think incorporating the plants has that similar thing where it's like it softens, dare I say, it sort of softens what would be seen otherwise as a scary BDSM tool and
Totally.
practice, and makes it more accessible.
Totally. Yeah, that's really cool. Now I'm thinking about little kinky things I can do with
Roses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I already, I play with plants in different ways. I love shoving flowers into people's mouths as, very good gags. Because then also as they breathe, they like puff out, the petals,
Yeah.
which is very beautiful. So those are some of the performances that you all do. What else do you do on top of that? Other type, you have your Instagram where you're collaborating with photographers and videographers and doing really amazing, art collaborations. What else can we expect from Sacred Sadism, or even upcoming things you guys are looking to expand it?
We also do what we call like a florification scene in a back bed. Not sure how it's going to work during COVID times, but Genevieve started doing equine florification.
No, I mean, I use florification as like the term to describe this experience that we offer through our platform, which is basically a back bed session / photo session, where you get put into a latex back bed. It's transparent. I arrange the flowers on the person's body, and then they get sealed, pressed, vacuumed into it, and become sort of a human pressed floral arrangement. And then Themba takes photographs with his drone, so these kind of aerial photographs from above of the pressed floral arrangement. So it's a little bit of like a standard, in a sense, BDSM session. We also do some sensation play and impact play, depending on the person's preference, while they're inside the bed. And then they also get photographs of this highly aesthetic pressed floral image of them in the bed. So that's something we really enjoy doing. We don't know how we're going to do that in the future, but maybe people who do in-person, or are figuring out, other professionals who are figuring out how to do in-person sessions right now. I don't know if there's anyone who's got advice on that.
Let us know.
Let us know, because we don't know what best protocol is right now, to be honest. People who are in the back bed breathe through a small hole, so it's,
I mean, I guess it's technically very safe because you're like confined, as long as as long as you guys are wearing masks, and everything is clean and sterile, and it's just 3 people, then
outdoor. And we do it outdoors in our yard.
Yeah, so I feel like it actually is quite
probably
one of the safer things, because it's not like, the problem is all the random groups of people with like no aerating space, so everything just gets trapped. But if you guys are doing that outside and there's a drone, and really like you two are the only ones. And you two are the only ones who need to wear masks, because if they're breathing through a hole and nothing is around them, then I feel like that is actually one of the better experiences for safe, risk-aware play in that.
And I think if we did do it, that would be the main thing, is if everyone's aware of and consents to the risks, then, I mean, that's, I think the way a lot of people are figuring out their social life now. Is figuring out, like, well, let's just be really, really open about where I've been, who I've seen, and what risks we're willing to take,
Yeah, because everything. Yeah, it's very much like BDSM in general, right? Be risk aware. Like, everything we do has a bit of risk. If we're, if we talk about it and we try to work through it, then we can minimize the risk as much as possible. But this world, this realm is risky. Anytime you do anything, there's just possibilities. So, and now social lives are lined up with that, right? Like, who have you been with? Where have you been? What are you doing? Like, take your temperature. What's your oxygen level?
It's sort of fascinating.
Yeah, it is going to be fascinating, interesting. But I think that's why these experiences are going to be so important. Like, what are experiences we can create on a one-on-one type level that I think people are going to really be craving, especially because we've all been so separated. People I think are going to get into wanting to have these intense, intimate experiences compared to maybe going out in big groups anymore, but have these individual experiences that can push them mentally and physically. So I wanted to ask you, what do you make your tools out of? The things that you sell on your site, just for our audience to know.
They're made out of like plant reproductions, and then I think most of them all have wooden handles that I carve by hand.
And also our butt plugs, Themba hand carves the butt plugs, and then we use a body safe, non-porous, like resin coating for those. Actually, we were just looking at one of the butt plugs you made for me today. I need to try that out again. And then the plants are like rubber, silicone, plastic. Just depends. We source them from a store here in LA. Our commissions are still open. We've stopped kind of making batches. We want to really focus on, I think, the more conceptual parts of the project are a little higher on our priorities right now, especially because right now is a time where I think we should all be really looking within and working on ourselves and sharing what we find and trying to make a better world. And I know I personally have struggled with like what it means through the course of this project over the past 2 years, what it means to be a business and like what's tied up with this concept of being a business and running even if it's an art project as a commercial enterprise, like what we've learned through that has been really interesting and I think has given us a lot of food for thought about the world we want to see. And that being said, Themba is also making his own objects and floggers and stuff that is.
Sure. It's I guess I'm primarily doing it through Instagram right now, but it's called Themba Woodworks, and just do like handmade wooden kink tools, some vanilla stuff too, but floggers, paddles, less lethal knife play knives, which are completely wooden knives. I also do metal bladed knives that are a bit sharper. That's about it.
Gorgeous work. Gorgeous work. So we recommend that you follow Themba Woodworks, is Themba's offshoot project. Also kinky stuff. So definitely check this.
Awesome. And can that also be found through Sacred Sadism as well? All interconnected. Okay, good. To allow people to go into different areas and find those things. I want to open it up to questions. So for those of you watching, just feel free to ask a question. I will only be putting up respectful questions that are not like, please make me your slave, because some of those are on here. But I do want to ask, what is your personal, like at this very moment, what is your personal like kinks right now? What are you enjoying or exploring?
I mean, we could talk about the milk thing.
Oh yeah.
So like a recent, not new but newly explored kink that we got into at the beginning of quarantine. Was
newly realized.
Newly realized.
When we first got together, we both discussed.
On our second date, Themba told me he was interested in A&R, which I didn't know was a thing, but A&R stands for Adult Nursing Relationship, and I think he said induced lactation.
Yeah. I had been reading about it. I was like, wow, this is so fascinating that like we can do this without.
And that's that you can with enough stimulation and often like a breastfeeding or pumping schedule, anyone can induce lactation. And so we always knew, we had in our mind this goal that someday we're going to have enough time to do this like 8 times a day breast pump schedule. At the beginning of quarantine, I was supposed to go to Norway. Yeah, at the beginning of quarantine, I bought a breast pump, and I was supposed to go to Norway, and I was going to do this whole induced lactation with a breast pump project that got canceled. And I was like, well, we're here. We lost our jobs. We have nothing better to do. Let's do this using the breast pump and also using Themba's mouth. Let's see if we can induce lactation. Because I had already created some small drops over the years. Just from
stimulation.
And we wanted to see if I could create more volume when put on a lactation protocol.
And we were going to put it on OnlyFans to document it.
Yeah. So we did an OnlyFans documentation for about a month, but what we discovered is once we got into the every 2 hours schedule, it was like terrorist
work.
It was a lot of work, and it was the beginning of the pandemic, and it's just, I think, adrenaline was running high for a lot of us.
Yeah.
We were like, what's going on in this new uncertain time? And it ended up feeling really kind of like yucky and annoying to be on this schedule of like produce when this whole system of production was like, felt like it was on the edge of collapse, So it was like it was a real head trip of a kink to be experienced.
Yeah, it was a very interesting learning experience.
You were being driven crazy by the sound of the pump.
Yeah, the pump was so loud. I'm just like, oh my god! Again, and like every 2 hours we would do like pumping.
20 minutes of pumping.
And
every 2 hours.
The like phone alarm would go off. I'm like, god damn it again!
Like,
no. We jumped in the deep end.
I mean, props to people who breastfeed and have breastfed.
Yeah, really, like
it is
makes you
joke.
aware of how much work that is.
I mean,
It makes you very compassionate for mothers, right, who breastfeed, because that shit.
It's not a joke.
And babies get hungry often, and you're just like, and then people are like, why do they need time off? I was like, you have a baby, like you have this thing sucking on your nipple for 10 hours a day.
And we weren't even doing the night feeding schedule, which is like recommended on induced lactation blogs and stuff, is that you do get up every 2 hours over the course of the night and you keep doing it. I was like, no.
You're like, I love you and I'm open to this kink, but no, I'm not doing that part of it.
We decided we're happy with like the couple drops that I produce every day. We're like, that's enough.
Well, I feel like it's gone up since the beginning. I don't know how much description we're allowed to go on.
Yeah, you can say anything.
I mean, it used to be like a couple drops, but now we can get to squirt every once in a while. We're like,
wow. So what does it taste like?
It tastes like breast milk. I kind of remember it from when I was a kid. It's like slightly sweet. I don't know how to describe it other than slightly sweet and human breast milky.
And I'll admit that I have like an aversion to tasting my own breast milk. I don't know why. I haven't deeply examined that or what that's about, but like I don't really enjoy tasting my own breast milk for whatever reason.
Okay,
I'd be interested in like, I'm definitely a person who's like, oh, what does this taste like? I just want to know. Like, I don't have to do it again, but I just want to know. But like, wow, I've been very interested. Like, I find certain kinks very fascinating. Just because I've never had a desire to be a mother. So you know, there are certain kinks that are revolved around that, whether, you know, that's adult baby, you know, type of things, but also the breastfeeding, I know, is a big fetish, the lactation, but also the pregnancy fetish, like pregnancy porn is very big. And my partner, you know, one of the first conversations we had was that he was like, I have a thing for pregnancy porn. So like sometimes he gets a little like very turned on if like I just have like a food baby. You know, where I'm just like,
Right.
where I'm like, I'm really full. And he's like, let me see.
Totally.
And I'm just like, what is it? And he's like, I don't know. It's just like it's just like maybe it's just like the power of like giving birth or something. I'm like, what is, just because I've never felt that connection myself. Like I'm just kind of like, I think women are beautiful when they're pregnant, but they've just never had that desire. So like this sexual desire behind it, I'm always like, I'm still like, I find it so fascinating, you know, around
what are
it.
any of our kinks?
I
You guys
know.
are amazing.
Yeah. So that's what I love, is like being able to like explore that in our world, right? And talk about that and see what it is for, you know, everyone. But so is this a kink that you guys can want to continue to explore? Or do you feel you've kind of gotten to a point where you're like, this is a little too exhausting and so much work put in it, we've tried it out, I think we're good? Or
I think probably the like heavy pumping, we're done with that. But I mean, nipple play has always been a big part of what we do, and now that, you know, we've got this little bonus milk, I think we're gonna. It's still gonna be part of
Yeah, I think
part of the fun for us,
it's
for sure.
the whipped cream
Yeah.
on top. Yeah.
So Genevieve, is there a kink that you've been really, you know, wanting to explore or have been exploring currently?
I sort of talked about this on our Sacred Sadism Twitter a little bit. I've taken to like reposting plant hentai there, which I find really interesting.
Ooh.
Because there, you know, it's funny to like come upon a kink like eco-fetishism and sort of develop it, and then go into like the deepest recesses of the internet and discover that it's had a place, a home for a really, really long time. So I'm really interested in kind of the hentai that's sort of, there's a bunch of different types. There's like vor, plant vor, which is where like a carnivorous plant like swallows a person. But I'm more into I found this one person who creates this plant porn that I am embarrassed but willing to embarrass myself about, that like I do find genuinely sexy and hot and horny. It's like these like plants that like suck on these fairies who also have penises in like a magical fair. When you said like fairy wonderland, I was like, yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about. It's like a very like I think it's the kind of kink that is embarrassing and like a mockery to a lot of people. But I'm like, I think it's really hot, the idea of being sucked off by a flower, like a,
Yeah.
you know. So I don't know. I found that really sexy, and I know it's weird, but who cares?
No, I love hentai. Like that was sort of I was always, you know, a big anime fan. And so during my sexual development, I think hentai was sort of the first thing I could get access to, especially at the beginning of the internet too. I definitely would come across hentai and be like, ooh, and I think it really developed a lot of my own kinks from the hentai I've looked at and either watched or looked at, you know, hentai like, you know, manga, you know, porn.
Sure.
Yeah.
One thing I like about it too is like I know that when I have watched porn with actors, like I think for me it's kind of satisfying too to not, I guess, when you're in the mood to like get off and not be worrying too much about the ethics of the porn you're watching. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's sort of like safer in a way for me, because I still have not, quite figured out what porn with real actors is like appealing to me, and
Yeah.
how to go about investing in it, I guess, in a way that's the right way to do it.
Yeah.
Kind of just like, it's like guilt free. It's like an animation.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I think it's hard right now when you are asking yourself some of those really deep questions around yourself and your own kinks and your own interaction with sex, the world, just, consumption, right? How we consume things and trying to think what aligns with our values and how we consume whatever we consume, right? And so sometimes, like, kind of going into that full imaginary space compared to like dealing with all of the other like based in reality, it feels a lot safer. It feels like there is, because there's not fairies, like these don't exist. So like,
right.
you just feel like you can have freedom in that. I've been very interested in more like having people dive into erotica, like getting away from the easy stimulation of like image type porn, but really, hearing somebody's voice, either reading erotica or hearing audio erotica, and really diving into your other parts of your senses instead of like relying on just visual stimulation, which I think, becomes a little too much sometimes. Like we're just bombarded with visual stimulation that sometimes it's just nice to hear. Like there's been all these new like erotica like apps where you can just listen to amateur folks have sex. You can just hear what they say to each other. And so it's nothing more than that. And then you can just use your own imagination about what they look like, who they are, all that stuff. And it makes it easier for people who aren't feeling represented in the mass, in porn right now, which a lot of people aren't represented. So it kind of makes it a lot more accessible. I do want to ask, can I ask about your any future projects you guys are working on, or anything you want to kind of drive our audience to go check out, see, look forward to? I know it's kind of a weird time, so I'm not sure if there is anything.
I mean, I guess for me, I'll just speak briefly and then you speak. But I just, we created a little highlight on our page about prison abolition and getting people started, like looking at that work. To me, that's more important than anything that like glorifies sacred sadism right now. Like this is an incredible moment where people are waking up and doing the work to see that there's a lot that has to change within their own hearts and within America and the world. So I recommend people going to that abolition highlight. It's just a few resources to start, but hopefully it can like lead you down the road to start doing your own research about like what a world without prisons and the prison industrial complex, including the military industrial complex, could look like. That's really like, not a non-punitive world is like at its heart what we hope to like emphasize in this project. So to ask that people just look into that and look into their own hearts and minds about that right now. That's what's important to me.
Awesome.
I don't really have much either. I guess I have 2 wooden sculptures in a fundraising show right now for Murmurs Gallery. I guess the website is murmursartauction.com. And it's raising funds for Black Lives Matter LA and
Summit Everything, which is a food donation food box for South Central LA, right? Like food box donation initiative.
Awesome.
And I'm personally practicing direct action, so I'm allocating anything my pieces make to directly support other Black artists that I'm inspired by here in LA. But yeah, that's about it for upcoming stuff.
Yeah. I think now it's a good time to focus on Black artists,
Yeah.
their voices, and highlight that, and do some reading right now. We've got a lot of time at home, many of us, to do that.
Definitely. And a lot of documentaries out there right now too that are really great. So no, I think it's really, I love your work. You know, we at La Maison du Rouge are a big fan of your art, your work, and what you guys are creating. And so we're really thankful that you could be on our show and we can share a bit of your story and what you guys are all about. And this will be on YouTube. So, and I'll send you the link when it's on YouTube. Which should be done tonight. And I want to just, thank you again for joining us on our weekly broadcast. This was a very enlightening conversation, actually, and give me so many great ideas, especially with plants and electricity now. I think it really is going to highlight for a lot of people too, playing with that. So I want to thank you two again. And, for our audience out there, thank you for joining us. Please sign up to our YouTube if you want to check out all our videos. We're trying to get all our past videos up there. And we also have a Patreon if you want to support our weekly broadcasts, which both Dee and I do, out of we don't make money off of this, you all. We do this for our community, to educate those out there and to bring the voices of those who are usually not represented in our world. So everyone have a good night and thank you. Thank you too.